Great. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to Enwayaang, The Way We Speak Together. This is an ongoing series of talks we run through Zosky College at Trent University. Enwayaang is the name of the building that Zosky College is housed in, and the word Enwayaang means the way we speak together. So we take that quite literally and try to have conversations on this platform, really. We did them in person, and now we're doing them online, and maybe we'll get back to in person at some point, but we have found we get a really interesting audience for every Enwayaang talk, sometimes based on the speaker and sometimes based on it's just kind of a great way to zoom into something and have a conversation and hear from someone from your own home. So thank you for joining us. That's the name of the series. My name is Melanie Buttel, and I am the principal of Peter Zosky College. So I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement before I introduce Mary. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings. And at the last Enwayaang, I said I'm trying harder to go beyond the words and to say what that also means is that we have to think about what we do in our own context around truth and reconciliation and allyship. So I encourage everyone to learn a little bit more, to learn more from even the Trent University FPHL, First Peoples House of Learning, is a great place to start from an educational standpoint, and their website has a lot of resources on it. So take the actions you can take where you can take them as part of that truth and reconciliation commitment, and miigwech to our local elders and to the Anishinaabe and the communities around Trent. Thank you for that. So Mary is proof that a passion for grassroots activism and community volunteerism can turn into a long and successful political career. She's been a dedicated community volunteer and municipal politician, having served in positions that have included Lakefield Councillor, Deputy Reeve, Deputy Warden for Peterborough County, and Mayor of Selwyn. Mary retired from community politics in 2018. I don't really think of Mary as retired because she still has her fingers in a lot of pots, but officially retired, and having never lost an election that she ran in, and having served in municipal politics for over 20 years. Mary received an honorary alumni member award from the Trent University Alumni Association in January 2021, and she became an honorary fellow of Peter Zosky College as well in 2021. So we're really delighted about that. Mary has 3 grown kids and lives in Lakefield with her husband, Al. She has great advice for students, and I think really anybody who has an interest in being a change maker. And part of that is start small and get engaged. And that can lead to a long career. So on a more personal note, I will say I've known Mary for more than, well, I'm going to say almost half a century. Almost half a century. Let's go with that. And as a friend and neighbor, and also I would say Mary was a real mentor to me. So Mary helped me get some of my first jobs when I was a teenager and carried me along on an interesting political I'm going to say career of my own. Mary and I worked together on a few different election campaigns and in community politics. And then I went off and did other things in education, and Mary just soared into community politics on a much deeper level. So it's really a pleasure for me to have you here today, Mary, as a friend and mentor. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks, Dr. Buttel, Melanie. It's really lovely to be asked to speak, and I am happy to talk about my passion, and that's community engagement, and how that can lead to local leadership. So I'm really happy to see so many people taking the time today to be involved. I recognize some of the folks on the screen, and I look forward to lots of engagement. I won't speak for too long because I think the discussion is the important part here. I'm looking forward to your thoughts because not only as a volunteer, but as an activist, one can be engaged in the community. And as a result, and I'm sure you all have your time that you spend as volunteers and engage in the community, but you know that when you do that, you grow your skill set, you grow your local knowledge and your connections to other people, businesses, organizations, and in the end, you make a change for the good, for the broader community. But every sincere engagement provides you with a stepping stone. And when I think back about how one engagement with a community group leads to another opportunity, to another, and it's really incredible to think back about how it's all like a stepping stone, really, from one skill and opportunity to another. Melanie talked about my having been engaged as a volunteer for a long time, and I not only through our children's schools and a children's concert series, and through an environment group that we created in Lakefield in the 80s and into the 90s. I sat on an environment committee of council. So when I put my name forward to run in the village of Lakefield, it was a natural next step, because then I had the opportunity to have an effect on the bylaws, the policies, in a much broader way. So that was kind of exciting. But it was as a result of that solid knowledge of the community that I think I was able to take that step. So during my time on council, again, then I got to know even more community organizations and individuals who were giving so much of their time to make this a better place to live. And they got to know me and to trust me. So it's a synergy that develops as you create those relationships. The whole Peterborough region, the city, the 8 townships in the county of Peterborough, the 2 First Nations, we are well known for our volunteering and our philanthropy. So I don't know whether it's the demographics, we're an older population, whether I'm sure people have some information about why it is, but I think it's a culture too. It's what people do in this area. They give to the community. And so I think for any students or anyone new coming to Peterborough area, it's probably a good route to go to understand that and get involved. I made a few notes. I just wanted to say a few things that I think are important about volunteering. And I think the not-for-profit sector gives a safe way for people to pursue a passion and of helping others in a way that suits them. And there is so much mentoring and training. Melanie mentioned mentoring, training. It's all available free if you are knowing how to access that through these community organizations. If you're committed to them, they will help you to learn these skills. And I'm just, in terms of a student perspective, I think it's a great way to build a resume, and it does and will lead to future employment, whether it's the connections that you get in the volunteering or whether it's the resume building that's been done. But I have to personally confess, I don't know whether Melanie's heard this story, to having gotten involved in community engagement at an early age. Grew up on a farm about 45 minutes from here, and we had the Busy Bee Club. So my brother and I, with other kids in the community, would get together once a month. We'd have meetings. We would have we kept minutes. We had social time, and we had dues that we would collect. Our few dollars at the end of the year would go to an overseas charity. And when I think about it, it's all the parameters of a service club, but we were doing it as 6, 7, 8-year-old kids and having a great time at it. So I think it's interesting how, if you look back at what your interests were when you were young, oftentimes you're doing it now. during my time as mayor, I had the opportunity to go to quite a few events at Trent. I really appreciated the fact I was invited to various engagement opportunities. And I did get to meet Dr. Mark Skinner at the Center for, he's the founding chair of the Center for Aging and Society. And I was really thrilled to find out about the work that he was doing. I went to hear a speaker, a professor from Australia he was working with at the time. And it was research on aging in rural communities, volunteers aging in rural communities. And it's an international issue that he's done research on in Canada, but is working. I haven't had a chance to catch up with him. And as Martin said, we all need to get a little bit caught up. I'd love to hear where they're at with that now. But I really was intrigued because it became, I had seen our volunteers age before my eyes. I could see what was happening. I was aging too, but I could see our volunteers in our community were the average age getting older. And so how were we and our organizations going to cope with that in future? What support systems were we going to put in place? One great example was our library system, which was highly dependent upon volunteers. And so I think there's a lot of academic work to be done to study what support systems need to be in place for organizations. And there's not only increased age of average volunteers, but declining numbers, a lot due to the financial situation that people find themselves in. Younger people don't have the resources to have the time. And so we're going to be challenged as in the future. Many organizations already are. A great example of a volunteer opportunity, I always think, is the United Way, and Trent does an amazing United Way campaign every year, very successful. Students, staff, faculty are all involved. So it's a fun opportunity, but it's an important one as well. The pandemic really made us realize how important the connections that people have when they go out into the community to volunteer, how important those are for their mental health. And I always think about my 91-year-old friend who was going for a couple hours a week to check books in and out at the local library, and she coordinated volunteers, and that was gone. So what we did, we all supported our family members, we supported our neighbors and our friends in ways that we could. But I think it's really hit home how critical to social well-being volunteering is in our community. And as I say, I'm sure there'll be more academic work to follow on that. And when it comes to volunteering, you can do it in so many different ways. You can choose an hour or two a week, or you can be on a local committee or board. And so there's a different degree of commitment, but whatever it is, you're setting yourself onto a path of discovery and you make a difference in the community. I've always been involved in politics, and eventually being an elected official, I always say it's a privilege, and I got to meet so many people and learn so much. And after having had that opportunity, no one will ever take that knowledge away from you. It's something you carry for the rest of your life. So I'd like to engage with folks about the benefits, but also some of the challenges of volunteering. And I'm happy to open up to questions and dialogue. And thanks again, Melanie, for the opportunity and everyone to be able to talk about this topic today.
Thanks so much, Mary. I was just jotting notes down about, I was thinking in particular about the decline of volunteers. And just this morning, I was talking with someone about university age students, not only, I mean, you made some really interesting, good points there about aging volunteers, but if they're not being replaced, what's happening? And one of the things we were talking about is that it seems like university students have more on their plates and less time every year. Like and I've watched that working in post-secondary for a really long time, that even if they want to give more of their time, they're really strapped for time. I feel like their workload has gone up and the pressures on them are immense. And you mentioned finances as well. A lot of, we just had a conversation yesterday about how many students are working. They would love to volunteer, but they need money. So they can't put the time into volunteering because they're putting the time into working. You mentioned that. I'm sure you don't have a perfect solution for us, but I wonder if you could just comment on that youth piece a little bit.
Yeah, I think I think what we need to do is create opportunities that are very brief. We know people don't have the time to sit on a committee or board, but if there's an event where we need a volunteer at the door for an hour, that gives them an opportunity. And so very brief times make the difference. And I think people really are hesitant, all ages are hesitant now to commit themselves to an ongoing every month kind of situation. But if they know there's one opportunity in time, they'll take that and feel good about it and enjoy it. And then in future, they may do the same thing at another time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And one of the other things, again, all the things that happened this week, I guess, in my life, but one of the other things we talked about, and I was in a meeting with Career Space, so our careers and experiential learning team at Trent. And we were talking about exactly this, that we pride ourselves at Trent on trying to create experiential learning opportunities for students. And experiential learning is sort of volunteering, but it's sometimes for credit. So getting some academic credit, it may not be a full credit, but when it is a full credit, that's actually still really challenging because it's more for some students, it's a big unknown. It's not, I go to class, I write my exam, I'm done the class. It's, ooh, what am I getting into here? Am I joining a board, or what's my commitment going to be like? So you make a good point there about ways that experiential learning for our students can be, a committed, I'm working this event, I'm working one event, and how that translates to their experiential learning. I will turn it over to others before I come. Yeah, go ahead, Mary, and then I'll open the floor.
If I could just say, I know too that volunteering can help people to understand what their passion isn't. And I think sometimes that's as important as finding out what your passion really is. Yeah. And I know co-op students in high school sometimes will say, boy, I'm glad I took that co-op course because I found out I really don't want to be in that field of work. So, there's a benefit that way as well.
It's true. And a lot of our students recognize that volunteering is part of how, just what you said, as part of how they're going to network and find career options. Actually, it's not unrelated to jobs, but they can't always see it right at the moment. Patricia asked in the chat, mentioned what you were also talking about, Maria, being an active volunteer until COVID hit, and then all the activities being on hold because of COVID, and how to get back involved, and whether you're, Patricia, you mentioned hitting some dead ends there, and any ideas around that. It's a hard one.
Well, I think most committees and boards have gone on Zoom. It's not as much fun, but it is pretty efficient for sure. And I think now we're coming out of, we're seeing more and more events in the community being advertised. So I think there is opportunity with those established groups and those established events, because there are people who don't want to go back out into the community and be exposed. They're reluctant right now, and they may never want to. They may be onto a different path of exploration and interests. So I think there are opportunities. I know I'm involved with the Lakeville Trail Stewardship Committee. I do their public relations, and we're going to have, hopefully, by the sounds of it, our first event since the pandemic in the end of November, a nature walk. And, so I think I think there are opportunities there to be a volunteer in different organizations, but it's going to be a bit tricky to see right away. We're not going to see big festivals for a while, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alex.
I think it's also interesting now. I don't know if it's been around for a bit, but I've recently got into thinking kind of outside of the box of what volunteering means. So I'm a trained scientist, and there's I guess a topic out there is citizen science. And the idea is it's scientists collecting data, whatnot. So an project would be, there's a bunch of Arctic penguins, their population is on a decline. They're taking a bunch of photos through satellite, and they need volunteers, or other scientists, or just any lay body of person, to count the penguins, to count the adults, the eggs, the little babies. And while I didn't initially think of it as volunteering, it is time and dedication to help for a greater purpose. So Patricia, to maybe that effect, maybe starting to think kind of what isn't paradoxically volunteering, but is, maybe that could be an option, as COVID doesn't really affect satellite imaging, so it's always going to be there. So other ones could be adding to the bird watch. And as you said, you're going on a nature walk. A lot of scientists are looking to see what species are coming and where they're going at what times of years, and many different things related on the science. I'm just a science nerd, so I like all these things, but I'm sure there's other contexts and other things you can be doing as well. So just to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was thinking about this, Alex. My son just gave blood for the first time, and giving blood counts as volunteer hours for your high school equivalent. And it is time, money, resources, including your blood, is a resource. I consider that part of something you're volunteering. It's just a different framing, I think. Roy, you asked a question that was also on my list, which is excellent, which was, what are the most challenging constraints either that affected you, Mary, or volunteers in general? So I think that's a good two-parter, like challenges for volunteers and maybe challenges that you face, Mary.
Well, it's a good question, Roy, because I think everybody approaches an organization in their own individual way. And personally, none of us have time to waste. And so we want a well-organized use of our time. We want efficient use of our time. So whether it's a meeting and we're going to be brief but to the point to get the job done, we're not going to waste people's time. We're going to be all prepared, or whether it's an event that we feel, I think we have to treat volunteering in a lot of ways like a business, because time is valuable. Time is money. And that's the first thought that I have. I don't know whether that's helpful at all. And the second question, remind me, Melanie, sorry.
Challenges that you faced, what you would consider some constraints.
Well, time is always the big one, isn't it? And deadlines. And but I do think, and back to my first answer, an organization that's not run with appropriate policies and procedures can be frustrating, and it can be unhealthy. And I think there's a place for the informal side, but there's also a place to be formalized if you want to be productive. And I'm thinking the work that Roy has done in terms of lobbying and advocating in the community, I think that's valuable work that people do. And it does take time. I understand how long it takes when you're dealing with an issue, and how challenging it can be, even emotionally, to deal with some issues that come up in our community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. One of the things, someone else can pop in, just put your hand up or shout something out or pop it in the chat. But one of the things that we also hear is like how much change how much difference can I make? I'm just this one small cog in the wheel. So how, I think what you're going to say, but sometimes people feel like it's too little and what I'm doing isn't enough. And how do you respond to that?
Oh, it's never too little because it helps in the end. I look at how the volunteering at food banks has increased during the pandemic. The whole social safety net has been so incredibly important for people who've been hard hit. And so, if you help one person get through difficult times, you've made a difference. Yeah, I think there's no doubt every bit helps. I also think too, you may get frustrated and think you're not making a difference, but sometimes what you can bring to an organization is you're throwing some more modern concepts, some more up-to-date processes out there. People may not agree with you because organizations tend to be set in their ways, just like governments and so on. And you never have that problem at post-secondary institutions, I'm sure. But the thing is that even throwing, we talk about systemic issues in organizations, and I lived that during my years as an elected official. There are systemic issues in local government. But if I threw ideas out into the air, I felt like at least that was what I could do, is put those words out there, put those concepts out there. And you're beginning the socializing of concepts. And I think that's important work.
Yeah, I agree. That's really good. Susan asked, is there a place for existing volunteers in organizations to tell their stories about what they do as volunteers? Oh, that's a good one, Susan. Yeah, to help others understand the different ways and the tasks they do, getting those motivated volunteers to talk about what they did. Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think that's maybe that's also part of that linkage we need when we say to students, for example, you should really volunteer your time. It's good on your resume. And they're like, okay, well, I'm really busy. It's like, oh no, but also it's not just a task. Like, you're going to get joy from this. You're going to feel, and Mary, I know you've talked before about, you talked about making this similar to a workplace. You need to recognize your volunteers, that you get training as a volunteer. I mean, I just did anti-oppression training for a board position I'm on. And what a great gift to have this additional training opportunity as part of my volunteering, right? So you're right, Susan. And I think that's something we should be looking at more when we are promoting experiential learning at an institution, to say this isn't just sort of about ticking a box on your resume or what's going to happen after you graduate. It's actually really empowering and rewarding when you are doing it. I mean, not always, Mary. You can, as you said, you can get frustrated, but if it's a joy, then it's a joy, right?
Yeah. And I think recruitment is a challenge that we need to think, as you say, as she has said, if there are ways to profile volunteers and the interesting opportunities that they have, I think that does spark interest for other people. Just as an example, our oldest daughter has her career, but on weekends, there's a not-for-profit in Halifax where you sign up as a volunteer, and she goes, and for an elderly senior who can't walk their dog, she takes their dog out for a walk. And so not only is this healthy for the dog, it's good for the senior to have an interaction with a younger person that they can count on a weekly basis. And, I think as we are more transient in our lives, I think we miss having immediate family around, and sometimes volunteering can give that opportunity to be with older people in cities where you wouldn't normally have a good way of connecting with them.
Yeah. And I think, I agree. And I think, Susan, there's a bigger question there, which is where and how do you get that word out beyond, so my example was at Trent, when we're sort of chatting with students about experiential learning, to sort of share what's so enjoyable about volunteering. But you're right, there's a bigger piece there, which is that broader, maybe we miss the mark sometimes as a society by not celebrating it as a joy, right? As something you benefit from. Nobody would volunteer if it was all drudgery, you didn't get something back for it, right? Nobody would do it. It has to have some reward at the other side. Mary, can you speak a little bit about your opportunities to engage with First Nations communities over your time in local government? I think that's an interesting area of your portfolio and something you put a lot of dedication into.
Thanks, Melanie. Yes, I would say it was the highlight of my elected time. We had a project that was funded through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities called SETI, Community Economic Development Initiative, and it was First Nations and municipalities in partnership, developing a way to increase economic development in our region for the good of all. And it's not just a way to do economic development. It was a way to get to know each other, a way to learn about our histories. And I was so privileged to be able to be a part of that. I have you can see the partners symbol in the background here and our purpose. We had 6 partners: the Peterborough Economic Development Corporation, the Township of Selwyn, Curve Lake First Nation, Hiawatha First Nation, Tonabee South Monaghan Township, and the County of Peterborough. And it went over about 3 years, and it was just wonderful to be able to develop working relationships as elected officials, but as staff to staff. It carries on to this day. I'm really happy to say it there was a ceremony at the end of the 3 years, but the working relationship is there and projects will carry on. So that was a real highlight.
That's great. That's great. And not every municipal politician can say that. So that's good. They don't all take the time.
Well, I think we're trying to encourage all municipalities to do this work, and it's all part of Truth and Reconciliation. It's important work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions out there? And I'm wondering about some of our students on the call, if you're hindered by the time constraints or the immensity of it all as a young person or as a student who's very busy, or if you can see the ways that it will, I mean, I know we said it has this enjoyment factor, but also the helping you along, right? I mean, Mary, you ended up as an elected official and with a lot of incredible jobs because you were volunteering, right? I'm sure you didn't see that path from the beginning, like, well, I'm volunteering here and I'm going to end up becoming a mayor, right? You didn't see that coming?
No, I would say not. And it just goes to show, like, you never know when a door is going to open and give you opportunity, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, Jonathan just wrote into the chat, I'm really engaged in the Trent, in the East Bank, and in the Indigenous and Otonabee communities. He is. Jonathan's a very engaged student. He's almost always at these talks, which takes some commitment. I usually see Jonathan coming to the teepee with us at Trent, and you volunteered for Orientation Week. And actually, the Orientation Week at Trent is a really good example of a volunteer gig that students love because it's fun, but you're also giving back to first-year students. If you're a third or fourth year or second year students, you end up that feeling of like, oh, I can help someone along. I mean, people say, oh, week, and everyone's just rah, rah, rah. No, there's a lot of students that are really quite interested in being leaders for their fellow students. Yeah, Jonathan's got it. He was there. And it's a really powerful role. Would you agree? I'm looking at Regan here just because I can pick on her because she's right in this office with me. That it's challenging to find the time. I'm looking at you, Regan, but you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
It is. I have a lot going on. I work here and then I also row and have school. So I got a lot on my plate. But I did volunteer a lot in high school.
And actually, I think that's relevant, Mary, because, I was thinking about what you said about being a kid and being naturally like going towards volunteer activities. I think you learn it and then you carry it on, right? So you'll probably go back to it because if you've already had the experience, it seems to kind of be something that becomes lifelong for people that are in the habit of volunteering, I would say.
I think that's absolutely right. And when children see their parents volunteering, I think that has an effect too. But no, it's true. High school is often a great opportunity for students to be able to sample all kinds of opportunities to volunteer. But you're right. It could be when you find you have employment and a little bit of stability and security, then you can take the time to give a few hours and enjoy that pleasure of volunteering.
We hear a lot from, I was thinking about when we recruit students for universities, like I've been at university fairs and recruitment events, and a lot of the time students and their families will say, well, but do you have co-op? I want co-op programs. They all want co-op because co-op feels like you're getting credit, but you're getting paid, right? And again, it goes back to that idea. And we always say, well, co-ops are great, but experience-based learning, when you're getting credit for it, in a way you're getting benefit that's almost monetary because it's helping you develop and get your degree. And it's actually quite nice because co-op sometimes means uprooting and moving to another community. And experiential learning, or a small component of a course, we have a Trent Center for Community-Based Learning, right? And that is a small component of the course, or a credit, as opposed to moving out of your community. And I always think, and you said it in your talk, it leads to letters of reference. It leads to getting connected with people. I mean, there were jobs I ended up doing and things I ended up doing because I met Mary, and because Mary and I were working on different projects, and then that led to X and Y and Z. So they're not only, I shouldn't say it that way. They're helping you get credit, they're helping the organization, but they're launching this much bigger process, right?
It's true. And I think people just have no idea the importance of those references when they're doing job applications, for sure too.
Yes, and if you haven't had a lot of jobs, or in my case, I interview a lot of students and their resumes have experience, like experiences in retail, for example. But if I'm looking at a resume and I see retail and I see retail and I see retail and then I see a volunteer gig, it's just as valuable. It is, especially when I'm hiring 18, 19-year-olds, I want to see the volunteer experience because it shows me something else that you did that was not, not that the retail stuff isn't good. It's great that students get experience, but seeing that extra stuff on a resume is part of the power there.
It's interesting you say that, Melanie, because I sat on the Police Services Board for 14 years and Dr. Tom Simons was on the board during part of that time. And we were doing a hiring process. I was privileged to be able to work with him on hiring the new administrative assistant. And that was exactly the point that he made. So some wisdom from Dr. Tom Simons.
Yeah, he was a gift. Sandy asked, do you have links to share for volunteer opportunities in Peterborough or Oshawa areas?
Well, the United Way would be able to do that. I'm sure, because I was on the United Way cabinet years back, and I have not been engaged with the United Way closely for quite a number of years, but I know that they have numerous organizations under their umbrella, and I think that would be an easy one in terms of being able to reach out, and they would provide that.
It's always worth going to not-for-profits and just checking their websites. I often think like YWCA, YMCA are also good places to start to see if there's a turnover happening. I ended up on a board because I was on an email distribution list, and then they said, oh, we're looking for new board members. And I just answered the email. So that was a good serendipity moment, which we don't always get. But yeah, checking your not-for-profits, community credit resource, what do they call it? Community Planning, Resource Planning Council. What's that one called?
Yes, that's a good point. And you know, you have to kind of zero in what's the interest. Is it environment groups? Quick is another organization that people can get involved with. There's so many different ones. I wouldn't know where to start, you know. But the United Way would be an easy one, shall we say.
Yeah, and Susan just put a nice link in for the peterboroughcanada.com/volunteers in our chat, which is perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I mean, the sad truth is that any not-for-profit needs volunteers because they don't have enough funding for all the staffing they need. And it's something actually politically people used to say to me, well, you know, don't volunteer too much because they'll cut funding and then you won't have the staffing, which is an interesting, I mean, I think we always need volunteers, but it is an interesting argument that I'm sure you would have something to say about that, Mary, but that argument that if everybody volunteers, it's a leaner government bill.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but I look at I always talk about the organization Community Care. Yep. And if there was ever an organization that was across the whole region, they're based in the county and the city, and they run on volunteers. They have paid staff. You have to have good paid staff to coordinate the volunteers. You have to have, in order for things to be run appropriately. But I think there's something about that organization that's special in that it's an approach to providing a service. It's just a little bit of service, but it takes people a long way to being able to stay in their home longer and in a healthy way. Yeah. So yeah, I agree that the not-for-profit sector is always, their budgets are so challenging, and there is not the kind of funding that there should be for those kinds of organizations. It's a critical part of our social safety net to have not-for-profits, and I'd love to see that the respect and the funding for those organizations that they really deserve. Mm-hmm. But I do think volunteering is a special component of providing that social safety net.
Yep, I agree. And I know we've sort of ended on more of the volunteerism, but if you had sort of a couple of, I mean, I think of municipal politics as volunteering as well. There's a lot of your time that goes out the door and you are not compensated for all of the things you're doing. You're almost networked in every way and you're never off duty, right, Mary? Anywhere you go, someone's gonna say, I have a thing I want to talk to you about, which you don't have to speak to the challenge of that. But what are some of the other greatest gifts you think you received being in municipal politics for so long?
Well, it's what I mentioned, all the people you meet and so much that you learn. Mm-hmm. And I take one step back, Melanie, to when I worked for an MPP. And I learned at that point, was my first opportunity to really work for government. And I learned what level of government does what and what organizations in the community do what. And so that helped me when I went into municipal government. And the hard part for some people in municipal government is they run for council and they think they can change this or change that, but it's not really something that's in the responsibility of local government. So by the end of your time engaged in local government, you know who is responsible for what, and you just have such a breadth of knowledge of the local community. Now, it changes quickly. All those contacts in the community change quickly, and I think we're all going to have to start to re-engage to know who's doing what because of the pandemic. I think we've lacked that. There's a lapse in there now, but it's it's building those relationships.
For sure. Well, and actually that's a great point. I'm going to kind of end on that, which is that Mary and I are proof that long-standing friendships and encounters and community connections can lead to many years of friendship and mentorship. And I think probably for sure you helped me along when I needed it in my 20s. I think I did lots of interesting things I would not have done for sure if I hadn't met you and if you hadn't sort of brought me along with you. So that level of community engagement and connection, I think you and I are proof of that for sure.
Oh, and thanks for the opportunity to be engaged with Socializing College. I look forward to future talks, watching them, and future ways that I can help and be involved.
I love that. Thank you so much. Regan, I'm going to ask if you can find it, if you can toss into the chat the next speaker link, just so everybody sees it. I want to really thank Mary for coming today. I'm going to pass the recording of this on to the Careers and Experiential Learning team to talk a little bit more about those start small and keep the student engagement, because I think there was a lot of valuable stuff here, and the comments as well actually were really helpful for that. So thank you everyone for that. I appreciate you joining our talk. Our next talk is Marangise Monsef, who will be with us on November 18th, and she is talking a little bit about building bridges between immigrant and Indigenous communities, and speaking a little bit about Afghan refugees as part of that talk. So I think it'll be, and she's a Trent alum as well. So Marangise will be with us on the 18th, 4 o'clock, same format. Thank you, Mary, so much for giving of your time for 20 plus years, but also for this last hour. We really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us today.
Bye.